my first YouTube how-to video. I'm going to disassemble a CT70 Z50 motor. Trying to get it done in 30 minutes. Keep it short. I'm going to try and go fast to keep it short. So you have to watch fast. I got everything I hope that I'll need, so I'm not messing around, running around looking for other things. This motor is a CT70H 4-speed. It's a little different than the 3-speed. If you're doing a 3-speed, then it is a little different, but it's not very different. First thing I did with this motor is drain the oil out of it. Of course, I bought this motor. I've never seen it run, never had it in a bike. So, drained the oil out of it. It was filthy. Took it to the car wash, sprayed it down, brought it home, dried it off, blew it off a little bit with some air. Soaked everything in WD-40 down into the intake hole. Sprayed everything that got wet with WD-40, basically blew it all out. Get the water back out of it so it didn't sit and rust. I cleaned it. I washed it 2 days ago, so it hasn't sat too awful long if I got water inside of it, which I know I did. Take a spark plug out, spray some WD-40 in there, cycle it over, intake and exhaust valve open, and get that WD-40, let the water out, drain the oil again. I prop it up, the motor on my little oil drain there, roll it around a little bit, try and get as much oil out as possible so I'm not getting oil all in my setup here, dumping all over the table. Hopefully when it comes apart, there's always some oil left in there. So I've got in my gadget here, this box, I forget the dimensions, but it told you to build one right in the climber's manual. Works pretty good. Support the motor, and so when you're laying it on its side, the shafts don't bottom out. But on a 2x4, it does bottom out. I've built a little bigger one. It's about 4 inches high. Keeps the kickstart shaft from laying on the table as you're working on it. Also got some newspaper under here and a dirty rag or two, which will soak up the oil that does come out to keep from making too big of a mess. When I take this to the car wash, I set it up with put an intake on there. I got a piece of rubber in here. That piece of rubber seals that intake, so you're not getting too much water down inside. So that's got to come back off first of all. What I usually do is take leave that top end on there a while until I get the clutch and the flywheel and everything off of there. The piston kind of helps a little bit to keep everything from just spinning when you're trying to loosen it. That's just sealing that hole to keep the water out while I had it at the car wash. Again, I took that off of there when I got it home and sprayed WD-40 all through there. Okay, you usually start with either the flywheel or the clutch. I'm going to start with the clutch side. These case screws are very easy to strip. They're usually quite difficult to get out of there. This is an impact driver, cordless, so it kind of bumps as it tries to remove these screws, so it kind of helps to rattle those screws out of there. This is a hammer activated, where you basically have to provide the power if you can see my marks on there, the way this works, you push it down and you spin it. You can see as I spin it, it draws up. So if I turn this to loosen, hit it with a hammer, it will break the stubborn screws loose. But if you're not careful, if you spin this as far as it'll go and whack it, you're more likely to skip in your screw. If this jumps in your screw like that, that's when you're damaging the heads. So you try not to do that. My impact driver, this guy, usually works really well. If this don't work, then I use that for the more stubborn ones. It's got a variable speed trigger. You use that. If you just go full bore, then you may very well strip out your screw. Hold it down in tight. Let it thump a couple times. The other thing, I left one of these screws. I cleaned out pretty much all of them, but I left one. It's full of crap. That's where you usually find them. You got to get that out of there, otherwise your bit isn't going to get in there and grab properly. I use a drywall screw or a small screwdriver or toothpick. Get the dirt out of there so your bit will go in. Otherwise, you're more likely to strip out your screw, and then you're going to have problems if you have one that just won't come out. You can drill the head right off it. That usually works pretty well. One of my favorite tools, disassembling a motor, is a rubber mallet, so you're not beating on this with a steel hammer, causing problems, causing damage. All these screws, everything on here, you're trying not to damage anything while you're taking it apart. If you're a collector type, then every screw is valuable. It's 40 years old, and they're not making those anymore. Anyways, rubber mallet. Got this all unscrewed, unbolted here. I'm going to try and lift it straight off. If you got a 3-speed, there's some loose parts under here that are stacked up on there. That if you have this thing laying the way that it is right now, you can probably knock this cover off without disturbing it all too much. Lift it off all nicey. So all your loose parts and crap don't come rattling out of there while you're taking it apart, and then you don't have any idea how it goes back together. But if you're careful, rubber mallet works well. Tap it up a little bit all around, get your cover off. I've drained the oil out of this pretty well, but this kind of thing may still well have a bunch of oil in there. Get to this point, looking at the clutch, it's a good time to take a picture. See how everything stacks up on here the right way you found it. I'm always looking at this to see if it looks like somebody's been in here. These screws don't look like there's no damage to them. Nobody's had a screwdriver on there before, unless they just replaced the screws. So I'm thinking that no one's been in here before, but may be wrong about that. These screws are usually some of the hardest ones to get off of there. The bit that I'm using is a number 3 Phillips, but the screws are actually number 3 JIS, Japanese Industrial Standard. But a number 3 Phillips does work. Number 3 JIS works better. The ones on the clutch here are actually number 2. JIS fits them perfectly. Number 2 Phillips works. I usually use a drywall, number 2 drywall bit. Fits them pretty well, better than a lot of the regular number 2 Phillips bits. Anyways, I need to get cracking. Just taking my clutch parts apart, and I am going to put all the clutch parts together. I consider all this is my clutch. This is a primary drive gear. I consider that part of the clutch. I'll put it all in the same place, put it all in a Ziploc bag, label what it is. People are always talking about bag it and tag it. So these are some of the worst screws to get off here. I typically expect that I may very well run into trouble getting these off. So I'm very careful with my impact driver, because as soon as it spins without spinning the screw, it tears up the threads and then I'm kind of sunk. Can try my impact driver, works pretty well again, but worst case you end up drilling the heads off of these screws. Give it a try. Push down real hard in here, make sure it's not going to skip. Use the variable speed trigger. That guy don't want to come. Ah, I blew it. Two out of 4. Okay. Well, I was hoping that wouldn't happen, but it did. And now we're moving along to this guy. This is going to require me to beat on this clutch, beating on my clutch. The clutch is attached to the crankshaft, bearings in there. You don't like beating on your crankshaft with a hammer, so you got to pop this clutch up. What I found that works, this is a piece of oak flooring. This is a piece of oak 3/4 inch. Seems to fit fairly well under here. Gives you something to beat against instead of just beating on your clutch and your crankshaft. So here we go with plan B. This is a number 2 Phillips, which would be much better if it were JIS. It's not looking good for this either. This isn't going to help my 30-minute video to be 30 minutes. That ain't going to come. Okay, plan B didn't work. Hang on. Plan C with another tool. Regular old cordless screw gun. Left hand drill bits. These drill, spinning, lefty-loosey is when they cut. So you're hoping that it's going to grab that screw and spin it out before you have to actually drill the head all the way off. Now when I started beating on this clutch with my impact driver, with my hammer, I should have probably covered up my motor a little better in case I knock that clutch apart, because it happens. The clutch falls apart and then all the little bits that are inside of there can fall right down into your motor and cause you problems, especially if you're hoping not to have to split the cases. So where I'm at now is drilling the heads off of these two screws. Now I can try this with a punch. Let me grab one more tool, hang on. You can try breaking these loose with a punch. Rarely works for me, so I rarely try it. I just drill them heads off because I know that's typically what's going to fix it. But if you take a good sharp punch, make a little divot, and then you drive that punch lefty-loosey, you might be able to break your screw loose. Otherwise, you're back to your drill bit. Spinning in reverse is when this is going to cut. I start with a small drill. This is always kind of ugly. It's not working. I think my drill bit is broke. Okay, I'm getting rid of the small bit. Going to the bigger bit. Usually I drill a smaller hole first, and then go in with the bigger one. And that usually helps to make the bigger one drill easier and makes it more likely to grab, but let's just try it. Just like that. Didn't quite get the head drilled off, and it spun the screw. Perfect. Perfect twice. Love it when that happens. Hate it when you have to drill those, but if you do, then you like it when the screw spins rather than having to leave the stud in the clutch to dig out later. Got a magnet here getting rid of some of my shrapnel so it doesn't end up in the motor. Even though this motor's coming all the way apart, it'll all be able to be cleaned out of there, but keep everything as clean as possible. And we're still looking pretty good for our 30-minute video, I think. Maybe not. Okay, back to my rubber mallet. Get this cover off of here. Try to be as nice as possible with it, all of this. Now inside of here is, this is what people call the oil spinner. When your engine runs, it's pumping oil. It pumps oil into this space while it's spinning, and all the dirt that's in the oil gets caught in here, or a lot of it. People say to clean the oil spinner. This is what it is. This is what you're trying to get rid of. Still trying to work fast here. Clutch's coming off. This is a little retainer, holds that clutch nut from loosening while the motor runs. This is a specialty tool made for this, to fit this clutch nut. You gotta have a, it's got two different ends for two different sizes. You gotta use an extension in there. Impact helps this tremendously to get this nut off of here. Make sure you seat it in there. Use the variable speed. If all goes well, spin that right off. Get the retainer out of there. Not cooperating. Alright, now this clutch is going to lift straight off. There's usually some oil in there. Try and catch most of that so it can be recycled. Primary drive, this is a small gear. The little brass bushing in there. This is the big primary drive gear. It's got a little circlip on here. Whenever you remove these, they have to be replaced. Try and reuse it, and from what I understand, they very often fail, cause you problems in the future. Alright, so now we're looking at the, this is also part of the clutch. Again, I'm trying to keep all that stuff together. Shift star, D10 arm. This is a shift, part of the shift shaft. Shift shaft on this looked like it was bent some, which this pulls straight out. But if your shaft is bent, then it's difficult. So it's best to try and straighten out that shift shaft before you get to this point. You look at it, it should be coming square out of the motor. If it's forward or back or up or down, you can put a piece of pipe on there, try and straighten it. Will make it a lot easier getting it out of there. I've already done that, but it's still, I think, a little bent. Okay, here we are with the D10 arm. Careful with these because the boss on the cases is prone to break. Get that right off of there. It's going to be part of the transmission, these parts. Now you can try, a lot of times there'll be problems with this shift star bolt will loosen up and cause you problems. This is the same thing. These screws are often tight. The impact driver is usually your best friend. So I got to switch back to the number 3 Phillips or TIS. Get this loosened up. I'm just gonna go ahead and take this out of here. Again, some parts. These little pins, you'll lose them if you're not careful when you flip this motor over to the other side. Now I should be able to pull this shift shaft right out. Because it's bent, I expect there to be a little trouble. And there is. So, back to my trusty, one of my favorite tools with this rubber mallet. Hold the shaft and pull, drive it with my mallet. This is going to give me trouble too. Losing parts. Something else went on the floor, I think. Don't know what. I'll find that later. Try not to damage anything as I go here. And there she blows. Right here is the oil filter screen. Good place to find out what's been going through the motor. This one is pretty dang clean. Looking in the bottom of the cases here, you might find some metal shrapnel, chunks of old gears. You never know what you're going to find, so you're always watching as you're doing this. This motor is remarkably clean inside compared to most of them. I'm liking all that. Okay, we're going to have to... This is the part where the shift shaft is too long for my 2x4 engine gadget here. Should just grab the other block. There's probably going to be some oil running out of here. But now I'm going to go to work on the flywheel. Get that off of there. $17mm. Gonna need that again in a minute. I've already had this off of here, so it's gonna come off easily. Lefty loosey. I'm worried about time, so I'm going fast here. Okay, another specialty tool. This is a flywheel puller. The threads are inside here. This is a left-hand thread, so you tighten it up. Spinning it lefty-loosey actually tightens this. Make sure you get it in there well. I know mine is in well because I've already done this before. Then your 17mm wrench or socket drives that in righty-tighty, and it'll pull that flywheel right off of there, just like that. This is the 70H flywheel. It's got a mechanical advance inside. I'm looking at all this stuff. Looking at all this as I go, looking for problems. I see my cases are busted up here. They've got some damage at different spots. This right here looks pretty good. These right here are number 3 Phillips or JIS again. Maybe the second hardest screws to get out of these cases. So So, I'm usually a little concerned with these two, but I've had pretty good luck. See what happens. No sweat. Got to pop this stator plate out. There's a rubber gasket around it, makes it fit kind of snug. If you start prying on this, you're likely to bust your cases like it looks like somebody's already done right here. But if you find a good spot where you can get underneath with a screwdriver, pad the cases, work slow from both sides. I'm underneath of the metal that is on these coils. My stator looks like it's in great shape. This wire is over top where it should be tucked down in, but otherwise the coils look really good on this. That's all good. Just pull straight off once you get it broke loose. Little washer right there, rubber O-ring I should say. Looking for the other one. Pretty common that it would be in there. You don't want to reuse those, but you don't want them just rattling around either. Okay, still trying to work fast here. Looking for my 10mm wrench. Top end's about to come off. So I'm going to break these loose with a wrench. Then I can get a Phillips bit into them and they'll come out easy from here. Should be able to.